welcome to the Environmental Learning Center at Clackamas Community College. I'm Maggie, an educator here at the ELC, and this is week 5 of our Wetland Wildlife Livestream series, where each week we learn about a different animal that calls the wetland their home. We've already learned about raccoons, great blue herons, beavers, and mallards, and this week we're learning about salamanders. Do you know what a salamander is? In order to better get to know these little animals, we are going to be searching for a salamander ourselves, learning a bit about their life cycle, and taking a look at a real-life egg mass. Super exciting, super excited to look at these things with you and better get to know this amazing creature. Salamanders find food, water, shelter, and space in wetlands, and most especially, they find a place to raise their young. Wetlands are a super important area for salamanders to lay their eggs. And we're going to be learning all about that today. Very exciting. The ELC is a wetland, and a wetland is an area of land that is covered in water. And the coolest thing about wetlands is the fact that they slow down, cool off, and filter the water, allowing the water to be slow moving and the right temperature and nice and clean for all types of plants and animals to live here. Especially salamanders really enjoy slow moving, cool water. So there are plenty of salamanders here at the ELC, and I'm very excited to share them with you all. Just a couple things before we get started. I'd like to introduce Michelle, who is our camera person and will be the one monitoring the Zoom chat. So if you have any questions about salamanders at any point during this live stream, please make sure to put them in the chat and I'll make time at the end to answer them all. And you should also hopefully have an activity sheet in front of you. This activity sheet is titled Sleuthing for Salamanders, and it is a maze that you get to complete of an adult salamander finding its way to the water, because salamanders, as we will learn today, lay their eggs in the water, and so they have to find their way through the forest in order to get there. Alrighty, let's get started learning about salamanders. So what exactly is a salamander? Well, salamanders are amphibians, so a lot like frogs. Frogs are also amphibians. An amphibian is a type of animal that is cold-blooded, so if you ever were to pick one up, you would notice that it doesn't feel warm like a lot of other living things do. They feel quite cold. And they also go through a metamorphosis, which is a big word, but it basically means that their body goes through a huge change or transformation. Typically, it means that when they're young, they live in the water and they breathe in the water using gills. And then as they develop and grow into adults, they actually lose those gills and gain the ability to breathe on land, which is super cool. So a lot of salamanders and a lot of frogs do this. As you can see on the photo, salamanders have smooth, moist skin. You can also see they kind of look like a frog if you look at their, budgy eyes and their, smooth, slimy kind of skin. But instead of being frog-shaped, they are more shaped like a lizard. So they have a body and a long tail, a head, and then 4 legs. Some of them live on land, some of them live on water. Some of them live either on land or water at different times in their life. They're also carnivores, meaning that they only eat other animals. So they'll eat slugs and snails and bugs and worms and a bunch of other just small little things that they can get in their mouth. And there are about 20 species in Oregon, and a lot of these species are really specific to Oregon, so you can't find them, or the Pacific Northwest, and so you can't find them in a lot of other places. So really cool salamanders that we're going to be looking at today, very specific to our area. But alrighty, so now that you know what a salamander looks like, have you ever seen a salamander in person before? I've only seen a salamander a couple times in my life. Once when I was searching through some fallen leaves with some of my friends, we found a northwestern salamander that we're going to be looking at today. And also one time when I was putting my feet in the water of a lake, and there were all these rocks, and I saw all these salamanders swimming around. Super cool. The reasons why we might not see salamanders very often, despite them being around, is the fact that a lot of them are mostly active at night, so they're nocturnal. And also, excuse me, they also tend to live in the water or underground when they're on land. So they'll be hiding under logs, under dry leaves, in rodent burrows, so little holes that other animals have dug, they'll move into those. And so it's quite hard to actually run into a salamander, just kind of, it's possible for them to be running around, but most of the time you gotta go searching quite a bit for them. So I actually did some searching here at the ELC because I know that northwestern salamanders, a specific kind of salamander, are present here. And I was actually able to find one underneath a log, and I have a quick clip of me doing that that I would love to show you. So let's go ahead and do that. So I was searching for salamanders, and so I was flipping over all of these logs, right? And so here's a log that I had just pushed over. You can kind of see in front of the log is the indent of where the log used to be. And so oh yes, so I pushed the log over and I saw right in the center a little northwestern salamander. So you can tell they're northwestern because they're this really dark, brownish, almost reddish color. And it was just trying to hide there for me. And as you can see, I'm using leaves in my hand to pick it up because there's a lot of things that could be on our hands that could harm them. So if you had put sunscreen on or something, you have like stuff on your hands, you don't want to get that on the salamander. And also some salamanders have the ability to release some pretty toxic stuff out of their skin to protect themselves. So as you can see, I am putting this guy back, not underneath the log where I found him, but right next to the log, because if I were to put him back right where I found him, I might squish him when I put the log back down. So if you ever pick up a salamander under a log, make sure to go ahead and just leave them really close to where you found them, not in a place where you could easily squish and hurt them. So yeah, it's super exciting to see a northwestern here. And I'm very happy that we were able to see that together. So go back to here. So I hope that you'll take some time sometime to do some salamander sleuthing yourself. Go ahead and go to some place like the ELC. Salamanders love to stay near water, so ponds, lakes, or some running creeks or rivers. And just go ahead and go to that really moist area and search in some leaves or under some logs or sticks or bark, and hopefully you'll be able to find yourself a salamander. Okay, so now I want to talk to you a little bit more about a salamander's lifespan and how they go through that massive change and all the cool adaptations they have in order to do that. Okay. So here is the life cycle of a salamander. Have you ever seen the life cycle of a frog before? If you have, this might look a little familiar. We know that frogs hatch from eggs into tadpoles, and then those tadpoles grow legs and become adult frogs, and salamanders are very similar. So as you can see, if you start on the right, they start out as eggs, which hatch into larvae. So these eggs are laid in the water, which I'm going to show you very soon. And then as those eggs develop, they eventually break out of their shell sort of thing into larvae. And those larvae are swimming around. They look a lot like fish, but they're actually just baby salamanders. And as you can see on that larva, it looks like it almost has these two little ears sticking out. But those ears are actually their gills. So their gills are on the outsides of their body instead of inside, like most fish. And so it has those gills so that it can get oxygen, just like how we breathe on land. And as it matures, it starts growing 4 legs, and those legs get bigger and the gills get smaller because once they become an adult, they actually crawl onto land and they breathe air instead of they oftentimes would breathe through their skin, which is super interesting, but some specific salamanders have lungs like we do, which is also super cool. While the larva is in the water, it will be eating a lot of little bugs that live in the water, little macroinvertebrates as we call them. And then once they develop into their larger selves and into an adult, that once they're on land is when they start to eat all of those worms and slugs and snails, like I talked about earlier. So super cool lifespan. This means that you are able to find salamanders in the water, out of the water, at any time during the year. They're just going to be in slightly different stages when you find them. So here is the life cycle in relation to the seasons of the year. So during the winter, you'll probably be able to find adults being more active. This cycle shows both a frog and a salamander. And then as winter is turning into spring, they'll start laying their eggs in the water. So we actually have a lot of masses of eggs here at the ELC right now, and I'm going to actually show you one. And then as spring turns into summer, the tadpoles or the salamander larva begins to develop and has its legs, and then between summer and autumn is when they start to move onto land. So super cool. Depending on what time of year, you'll be able to find a salamander somewhere. But let me actually show you the egg mass that we have here at the ELC. So I went searching around for some egg masses and was able to find this one right here of a northwestern salamander, which is the same type of salamander I showed you that I found underneath that log. So that might have even been the mother of these eggs, who knows? But here it is. Egg masses are super interesting looking. They have almost this like jello sort of clear coating over the eggs and are attached to a stick. So I went wading into the water here at the ELC and I saw these big sticks in the water and these eggs attached to them. So I just broke the stick off to show you guys, but I will be returning it where I found it. But here, if you can see, there are all these little tiny dots in this clear kind of jello looking stuff. And each one of those dots is a salamander egg developing into a little baby salamander. So super cool. This is actually two different egg masses, it looks like. So we've got this one up here, and then we've got this one over here. And this one actually looks like it was laid earlier because all the eggs look a little bit bigger and like they've been developing a little bit more, while this one is a little more smaller, so it looks newer. But yeah, as you can see, there's some brown stuff on these eggs, and that's just, you know, dirt and muck from the water. And that's actually what you'll mostly see. If you're looking for these eggs yourself in the water, you'll just kind of see this big mass that looks pretty brown. And that is, as long as it's in this shape, that is egg mass of a salamander, which is super, super cool. Super interesting. It will take a few more weeks for these guys to become big enough to break out and become larvae and start swimming around and eating stuff. But as of right now, they are still in the egg stage. And I'm so glad that I was able to show you guys this. And I hope that you'll come visit the ELC to come take a look at these guys, or maybe later on in the year when they are swimming around or even leaving the water as adults. So super, super cool. So we've been talking a lot about the northwestern salamander because that is the most common one here at the ELC. It's the one that you're most likely to find egg masses for and adults of. But I also would like to talk about a couple other salamander species that you might be able to find here at the ELC. In case you run into one, you'll be able to know that it's a salamander. So let's go through a couple more of those species. Okay, that's good. So this right here is a rough-skinned newt. A newt is just a type of salamander, but these guys are super interesting in the fact that, you know, they have that bumpy skin, which is why they have the name rough-skinned, but they also are super unique in the fact that they have a bright orange belly. So this is because newts are a little bit poisonous to a lot of creatures, and a lot of poisonous animals will be really brightly colored, and that's their way of letting the predator know, I'm poisonous, don't eat me. And so because the rough-skinned newt is brown on top for camouflage, so it helps them blend into the ground, their color is actually on their bottom, or on the bottom of their body. And so they will lift their head up and curl their tail over in order to show that orange part, that please don't eat me, I'm poisonous, which is super interesting. So, and here was the egg. As you can see, that little egg has started to develop, is getting pretty close to breaking out and being a larva. And then on the right, there is a little baby rough-skinned newt larva. Another one of my favorite salamanders is the Pacific giant salamander, and they are super cool. The last salamander I just showed, the newt, I believe is about 8 inches long, while this one is typically like 13 inches long. So it's a very big salamander. It's got this great marbling effect on him. And one of my favorite things about this salamander is the fact that it will actually make growling noises when threatened, which is very unique for salamanders, because salamanders don't have very good ears. They've got good, senses of touch, but when it comes to sounds, they typically just kind of feel the vibration of sound in their body. They don't actually have ears that hear very well. So the fact that this salamander makes noises when it doesn't typically hear noises is actually really interesting. And so I hope to run into one of these guys someday so I can experience being growled at by a salamander. But here it is as a larva in the water. As you can see, it's very big and it's got these big bulging eyes and weird face. This one, because it is much older, you can see that the gills on its body that look like ears have started to kind of go into its head a little bit, and it's gotten shorter, which is super cool to see them transform. Another type of salamander that has been seen here at the ELC is a long-toed salamander, and these guys are actually much smaller. So I think they're only like 6 centimeters or something. If they're next to another salamander, they look very tiny, but that is their full adult form, and they have this really great yellow kind of marbling on their back. Super great, and they're called long-toed salamanders because one of their toes on each foot is longer than the others. And then, of course, our favorite northwestern salamander. This is the guy that was under the log, and also the one who laid the eggs that I just showed you of the egg mass here. They are super interesting. They're also about 8 inches long from the tip of their nose down to their tail. As you can see, they have kind of this like ribbed look on their body, and they're very dark in color. And they can release a type of toxin to protect themselves from predators. So if you ever see one of these guys like covered in kind of a white substance, it's actually because they are releasing a little bit of toxic liquid from their skin in order to protect themselves. It's typically not dangerous to us humans, but I still would recommend, if you were to pick this guy up, that you use gloves, or leaves is a really good idea because they're used to touching leaves. But yeah, and here's a couple more egg masses. There's typically 50 to 200 eggs per mass. So the mass that I just showed you were actually quite small. And then here's another one found at the ELC. So yeah, that looks very much what it looks like in the pond. So if you're walking around a pond and you see something like that in there, it's a salamander egg mass. And here's another photo of a northwestern salamander here at the ELC. Okay. Well, I hope you had a great time learning about all these different types of salamander species and their lives and where you can find them at places like here at the ELC. Wetlands are super important for salamanders to be able to lay their eggs here, keep their bodies nice and moist throughout the year. And so wetlands are super important for salamanders. And I hope you'll take some time to go search for a salamander yourself. They're super fun to look for. But before we wrap things up, I would like to open the floor for any questions. So if you have any questions about salamanders, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Okay, so one question that I had about salamanders was, what type of predators do salamanders have? What types of animals will eat salamanders? And there's actually a lot of different creatures that will. Our friend the raccoon that we talked about would eat a salamander. Also various types of birds and fish will also eat them when they're in the water, as well as turtles. But one really cool thing, when I was talking about the rough-skinned newt, so the salamander that shows the orange under its body, there's actually only one known animal that's able to eat a newt without getting sick, and that is a garter snake. So if you've ever seen a tiny little snake, like on a path while you're hiking or in the grass in your backyard or anything like that, that is a garter snake, and they are the only known species that's able to eat the rough-skinned newt without getting sick, which I think is super cool. But alrighty, thank you so much for joining me today, learning about the friend of salamander. I hope that you'll join us next week to learn about coyotes, but until then, please take care, get outside, and respect all those who live there. Okay, till next time, bye!